everybody, and welcome back to an Invisible Illness Awareness Project. I actually have been planning to make a video talking about my experience with having an IUD for quite a while, but I wanted to actually get the IUD out first, and now I realize that I can't even really tell that story without backing up and explaining how I was on the pill and how I was before the pill. So basically, this is just going to become a whole birth control anecdote. So when I was in high school, I was not on birth control, but I would notice that there were maybe 2 or 3 days every month where I would just feel really down and less confident. Like if I had a crush on somebody, then during those days I would say, you know, there's no way they would possibly like you, and just like really feeling very negative. And then I went to college and met my first boyfriend. I decided to get a prescription for the pill so that we could freely enjoy ourselves. And I didn't realize what was going on at the time, but it seemed like these days where I was just feeling really down kept intensifying. Like every month it would get worse. We were living in the same building. We were seeing each other every single day. So then whenever there would be a break and we'd be away from university for a week, it was really hard to deal with the separation. But then into the second year, I was living in a different building, and I would say, come over here and stay with me because I have this huge room to myself. I didn't have a roommate for a part of the year. We could have all this space to ourselves. And he wanted to stay in his suite with all of his roommates, and I would say, okay, well then you go do that and I'll stay in my room by myself and chill. And when I was in there alone, it was like I just couldn't handle the loneliness and the silence, and I would get so emotional that I would end up going over to be with him. And then eventually we did break up, and I was devastated. And it took me a very long time to get over it. So then a few years go by. I met this guy who I had briefly chatted with a few months before, and I'll admit something about that chat stuck out to me, got my attention. It crossed my mind, hey, whatever happened to that guy I was chatting with? He seemed interesting. But we hadn't really chatted that long, and like nothing significant had happened, so I don't know why he stuck in my mind, but I was already on the pill when I first met him, and it was just so surreal. I felt like all of this hope, like I was on cloud 9. I had been thinking, I'm probably never gonna find anyone again. I've already had my love, and that was it. And then here was this guy, and I was like, yes, this is it. I found it. I was so excited. And, of course, definitely getting ahead of myself. I'd been seeing him for a couple months, and then I remember walking home one morning, and it was like just breaking my heart to have to leave him. And I just felt like I was suffocating or something, and I'm like, you know, what is going on? So I thought, I have St. John's wort here, I want to take it, but I know that it interferes with the pill. Then it dawned on me, I'm like, the pill is the problem. And then I put it all together and realized that was the issue with my ex. That's why I was just feeling so emotionally out of control and just not myself. So then I started looking into what else can I take other than the pill, and stumbled across IUDs. But that was actually the first I'd heard of them, and I very quickly decided that I wanted one and went to get it inserted as soon as possible. Of course, I went for the copper because I knew I didn't tolerate hormones well, and it just seemed like a genius idea. It was there all the time. I never had to worry, you know, because some people feel safe if they're on their period, but you can still get pregnant then. So I didn't have to deal with taking a pill at the same time every day, or forgetting about it, or worrying during that period where you're on your off week. So it was great. And it's supposed to be even more effective than any other form of birth control. So I can remember the day I got it inserted, it really hurt. Like, that moment hurt, of course, but afterward, it was like I was in so much pain. I remember walking down the street just feeling kind of like delirious and like hot and sweaty and just very disoriented. And normally when I have cramps, I can go home and I can lay on my stomach, and that pressure, that weight, will alleviate the cramps. In that case, laying on my stomach was the worst thing I could do. It really hurt, and it continued for several days. Then after that initial pain subsided, it wasn't as bad, but I would notice that on one day my period would be especially heavy. About the same time I started using a menstrual cup. I guess the seal is not as strong as it should be, because there was always one day where it would be a lot heavier and it would overflow. And like I would have to worry about it continuously leaking. And then of course, because you have the cup, you can see how full it is, and that was clearly the day where it was the heaviest. But it was like one day with a heavy flow. Small price to pay, especially because my periods aren't that bad anyway. I don't have to deal with a heavy flow. The other thing is that I was having pretty bad cramps for the first year. I was also telling myself, yeah, okay, like I typically don't have to deal with bad cramps or heavy flow, so I can tough it out. It's worth it. After the first year, the pain subsided, but they say that that pain is only supposed to last for about 3 to 6 months. And a year and a half later is when I noticed that my health very much started to decline. So I, at some point, a couple years later, started thinking, maybe, I know I was dealing with health problems before that, but maybe it got even worse because of the IUD. Maybe it was like my body was constantly trying to fight off this foreign object, and then just finally ended up being too exhausted and gave in, so that now my response to everything is just exhaustion instead of an actual reaction, instead of fighting back. So I started thinking I really should get it out, but I just love that feeling of all-around protection it gives me. I was actually still in contact with the same guy that I met right before I got the IUD, and I just love the idea of being able to shower together, for example. And I just felt that the IUD gave me this feeling of security, because there could always be something that happens, like somebody who tries to take advantage of a situation where you'd be really glad you had one. I typically wouldn't tell people that I had the IUD, but it just made me feel safer. So then there were several times where I was pretty much entirely bedbound, like only going out to get food, and I couldn't manage anything else. And I kept thinking, I really need to get this IUD out, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Probably from the point where I had had it for 2 years up until like 4 years, I struggled with this decision. And I told myself, well, I'm trying out other therapies for my health. One of them can take up to 2 years to have a response, so I should just keep the IUD until then, so that I know how this other therapy works, and if that's not enough, then I'll have it taken out. So finally I passed the 2-year mark. I went to the doctor, had my routine checkup, and she said, oh, well, you've had the IUD for 5 years now, and it only works for 5 years, so it's ineffective now anyways, and you need to have it taken out. Another thing I noticed, which is why I really felt that the IUD was playing a role in my overall health, was that I would feel this like extra level of inflammation right around my uterus when I had my period. Like, I would typically feel some level of inflammation around my abdomen when I'm eating grains, and it would be like this extra bump where my uterus is when I was on my period. I also have a navel piercing that never seemed to fully heal, and when I'm having a reaction, that will get inflamed and be very sensitive. When I'm on my period, it's the same thing. If I'm having a reaction and on my period, it'll be even worse. And I know that these immune disorders I have play a role in inflammation, that a lot of my symptoms are caused by excess inflammation in the body. So, of course, it doesn't make sense to be introducing something that's gonna cause even more inflammation that I don't need. So a couple weeks ago, I finally did get the IUD out. I did notice a really dramatic difference at first, but now looking back over the past couple weeks, I noticed a very big difference emotionally. This guy that I met right before I got the IUD, we have been in contact the entire time that I've had the IUD, so for 5 years. And even though I got my hopes up and felt like finally I found someone, he was never on the same page. He was just interested in hooking up, but I was just so crazy about him that it was like I couldn't help myself. I just had to try to keep finding ways to convince him that we would be great together. And I felt like if I could just find the right words to show him how much I cared, how loyal I would be, how great a relationship could be despite past experiences he's had, then he would give it a chance. And I just could not hold back. Like, my mind would constantly be working, trying to figure out what to say next, and as soon as I had said it, I would feel this sort of relief at releasing that thought, but then my mind would start going to work on the next thought shortly after that. And there was a point where I decided very early on, after we had only been seeing each other for a few months, where I said, I can't continue doing this to myself anymore. We need to cut off contact. And we had no contact for 6 months, and it tormented me every single day. Like, I would physically just, like, be laying in bed, like, I would feel this, like, warmth in my shoulders for some reason. But it was just, like, yeah, it really felt like physical torture. Like, the emotional torture was so bad that I could feel it physically. And it got to the point where it really scared me, and I'm like, why can I not get over him? Why can't I let it go? You know, what's, like, you know, I'm scared that I was going to end up wasting my whole life like this and never moving on. So my latest idea to spend time together was, the internet where I live is very bad and I need to upload these videos every week. So I said, can I upload them at your place? And then we left, but I left my computer there. So I had to come back the next day and pick it up. Earlier the next day was the day when I got the IUD taken out. And then after that, we weren't planning to see each other for a couple weeks when we had something else planned. So there was this part of me that kind of wanted to plan to see him in the meantime and not wait 2 weeks, but there was this other part of me that was like, it's not that urgent, we don't need to see each other. I really felt like I might as well just not text him for a couple weeks so that we don't get on each other's nerves. And I was just like really relaxed about it. I didn't really know why I was so calm, but I thought, well, I just uploaded this one video. I'm good for now. We'll see each other soon. So I figured that must be why I'm calm, and I didn't really think further into it. Then about a week ago, I was starting to get nervous, and I wanted to confirm again that our plans for this weekend were still going to happen. And his response was, no, I met somebody else. I'm not coming. And I was surprised, of course, but at the same time, it has crossed my mind before that this could be how it ends. But emotionally, I wasn't upset at all. I was so calm. I didn't care. I was like, okay, good, it's over, you know? Like, and then I thought, well, maybe I'm able to realize that and accept that now, because it seems like we've come a few steps further and we've gotten closer, and in those moments, it's like I'm really able to see how messed up this is and how this isn't a real and healthy relationship and it needs to end, and maybe that's why I'm able to accept it ending now. And I just kept thinking over it even more and realized, well, that can't be it, because I was looking forward to our plans, and typically when I'm looking forward to something, getting my hopes up, I end up panicking when it doesn't happen. And typically I would immediately be looking for the next thing to say to try and convince him to do it anyway. I wasn't panicking, I wasn't emotional, I wasn't upset, I wasn't heartbroken. I was perfectly calm. There was something that I had to contact him for, but I even said in that message, look, I know you don't want to talk to me, You don't have to. I have nothing to say, which is definitely a first. And you could even just send it to me. We don't even have to see each other in person, which is something I never would have said before because I would never want to miss any opportunity to meet up in person. And I've just been really baffled by this sudden change, and I finally realized it has got to be the IUD. And then I looked back and I realized, yeah, ever since I got it out, even before I would have been panicking, I was definitely much calmer. All of this time, I haven't been myself. That's why it was scaring me. So, moral of the story is, just because it's copper and not hormones doesn't mean it can't mess with you. Also, I've read that you're not supposed to get an IUD if you have any abnormalities of the uterus, and I have polycystic ovarian syndrome, and they were able to determine through a sonogram that my uterus was like dented at some point, which is why the IUD was more uncomfortable because it was really taking up all the space. I was really surprised when I got the IUD out how tiny it is and realized that my uterus must actually be that small. I can't say if the hormonal IUD would have gone better, but I know that I don't tolerate oral contraceptives, and now I can say with certainty that the copper IUD is not for me either. I know for some people with chronic illnesses, the IUDs are actually very useful and actually help keep their illnesses in check, but for others, it doesn't go over so well. So I would definitely say that if you have an illness and you want to get an IUD, pay very close attention, and just don't forget to consider that that could be part of any changes you see. Unfortunately, it is something that is entirely overlooked. If you ask your doctor, they're going to say there's no way that could possibly have any effects, but you need to pay attention to your body and your reaction. You are your own best advocate. I filmed this video just a few weeks after having the IUD removed. It's been a couple months now, so first of all, I wanted to do an extension to this video just to show how the results that I observed held up over time. There are also a few side effects that I left out, and there was another huge change that I noticed that had nothing to do with my romantic life, which was also reassuring for me, and I wanted to share that all with you guys, but I felt this video was already getting a bit too long, so I'm splitting this into part 2. Stay tuned next week, and I will see you guys then.